we have to get rid of the operative side of the CIA. They can't have these operations and assassins and dark ops people. I mean, they need to just be collecting intelligence. That's what the scope of them should be. And then with that intelligence, then there needs to be an actual checks and balances system before making decisions. Can't just go around offing leaders, and particularly our own, but really any leaders around the world. It's egregious to do that to any country, especially the ones that are elected by the people. It's atrocious. Let's get into the
By the way,
yeah.
Kim, I should mention one other thing because President Truman created the CIA, as I said earlier, in 1947. He, after a week after President Kennedy was killed in Dallas, he wrote an op-ed, which was kind of a bombshell at the time, in the Washington Post. He said the CIA was out of control. He said the CIA was killing leaders. He said the CIA was not the organization that he intended it to be. Now, everyone at the CIA knew how threatening this op-ed, a former president writing this in the Washington Post a week after President Kennedy was killed, was. And Allen Dulles flew down to Missouri, where President Truman was retired and living at the time. And he confronted him. He said, you didn't mean to write this. It was written by an underling, and you're too old, right? And you want to retract this op-ed piece. He said, no. Truman said, no. I meant every word of it, and I'm standing by it. So Dulles went home and did the next best thing. He changed the record about the op-ed piece that Truman had written, and he lied about it in the CIA documents. I found those documents. He lied. He said that Truman, an underling, had written it. He didn't mean it. He was old and kind of out of it. He didn't want to threaten the CIA the way he did. So that's how the CIA and Allen Dulles would operate. If they didn't like reality, they changed reality.
Yeah. Is the CIA just everywhere? I mean, the fact that you couldn't get anything published in the New York Times, and I also see that there was recently, for the Ford Died Trying, Mark Gorton actually wrote he did an advertisement that he tried to take out in the New York Times to call for the New York Times to investigate the JFK assassination, and they wouldn't run the advertisement calling for them to actually do their jobs as investigative journalists and actually investigate this crime, and they wouldn't even touch it. Do you think the CIA has infiltrated many of our media and news businesses?
Yes, that's a simple reply to your question. I was part of that effort, by the way. I helped Mark Gordon, who's a producer, by the way, of Ford Died Trying, the excellent series. Mark wrote this ad, as you say, for the New York Times, open letter really to the publisher of the New York Times saying, hey, look, 60 years later, it's time for you to do your job on the JFK assassination and look into it. He was going to pay $30,000 to run this ad in the New York Times. Once again, it went up the change of command. They had him change a certain language here and there, accusing the Sulzberger family of being complicit and so on. He did that, and yet they still killed it. A paid ad last week. So it's outrageous. The New York Times continues to be part of the cover-up. Is the CIA still involved with newsrooms, as Carl Bernstein alleged in his famous article back in the 1970s in Rolling Stone? Yes. They don't have to, frankly, have paid assets as they did in those days with Operation Mockingbird and other covert operations. They have them every night on MSNBC and CNN. You see nothing but ex-CIA guys, generals, ex-generals, NSA, FBI guys. They parade on those networks. And they're essentially, those networks operate as propaganda arms for the national security state. You know, Oliver Stone, when my books came out, the filmmaker in Hollywood, who's become a friend, told me that they'll never make your books into movies. And they were optioned again and again. The Devil's Chessboard and Brothers, my book about the Kennedys. There was great fascination with them in Hollywood, but they never no matter who was behind them, no matter what director was attached, what big actor was attached. They never made it to the screen. I defy you, other than Kill the Messenger, the great movie about Gary Webb, the journalist, who accused the CIA and the Contras of flooding our cities with drugs to finance their illegal war in Central America. He wrote that great piece for the Mercury, and he was driven to his death by the CIA as a result of that. They made a great movie about his experience, Kill the Messenger, but that movie was dumped by the studio, Focus Features, behind it. No one saw that movie. Other than that one film, I can't think of any movie in the last 20 or 30 years that was really critical, fundamentally critical of the CIA. They have set up an operation, a shop in Hollywood, the CIA, and they make sure that every project that is critical of the spy agency gets spiked, and they've done it very well.
Yeah. Well, they even practically admitted it that they set themselves up in Hollywood with the movie Argo. I mean, the entire premise of the movie was that the CIA was operating this, pseudo movie studio in order to get these hostages out of Iran. And so that's just kind of a little. That's what they were willing to admit. That of how deep their operations go. That's what they were willing to admit. This is incredibly frightening. When you start bringing up all these other things like flooding the inner cities with drugs, and you've got the murder of JFK, you got the assassination of these other gentlemen as well. There's so much yeah. I mean, this is just it's. I don't even know how do we deal with this? Like if they're in the media, they've infiltrated our news. They've infiltrated. They're assassinating leaders. Uh, I mean, this is just a behemoth that's gone rogue. It feels like this is the entity that runs everything. Even with Donald Trump, when he wanted to pardon Julian Assange, right? He wanted to do something about this. And from what I've been told by Roger Stone, was that Mike Pompeo, who was at one point the head of the CIA, pulled him aside and said, basically, don't you dare. Don't you dare. And so he ultimately, at the last minute, did not go and do what he needed to do for Edward Snowden and for Julian Assange. So is this the real deep state? Is it the CIA? Do you think that's just running everything? And then the president of the United States doesn't even have power over them, because that's what it looks like.
Yes, I think it's become much more dark, the surveillance state, much more encompassing since 9/11 than even Alan Dulles could have dreamed of back in his day in the Cold War. I think as independent journalists, you and I and people like us are really up against this all-suffocating media operation that is basically run by national security agencies. I founded Salon back in 1995 at the dawn of the dot-com era because I'd worked my entire life in journalism and I knew how bought and paid for most journalism is. So we were able, with Silicon Valley money at the time, and with this kind of upstart attitude of San Francisco journalists, to be independent for a number of years. And we defied a conventional wisdom. We sided with President Clinton against the so-called vast right-wing conspiracy to get him impeached over a consensual sex act. I still feel that was the right thing to do, even though we were no fans of Bill Clinton's
Right.
politics. So I believe that the independent media has a crucial role to play in this country. And yet, as the Bobby Kennedy Jr. campaign unfortunately has pointed out, a lot of the independent sites have been vacuumed up by the national security state. The Penske Media Corporation now owns all the media in Hollywood, The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, you name it. They even own the festival, South by Southwest Festival, which is used as a recruiting ground for the CIA at recent festivals there. So they've made a major move into independent media in the last few years. Groups like Penske Media that are aligned, I think, with the CIA. Rolling Stone magazine is another one that was snapped up by them. Rolling Stone used to be a great voice, independent voice of the counterculture. Jan Wenner, the founder of Rolling Stone, was on my board at Salon. I knew Jan Wenner. They published Bobby Kennedy, Richard Goodwin, who was an aide to President Kennedy, and many David Harris, the anti-war activist, and many others who are voices of the counterculture. Now they're the voice, I believe, of the national security establishment. That's bizarre that Rolling Stone, of all places, has become that kind of a place. But
Yeah.
yet, I think that's what's happened now. So it's up to us as podcasters, as bloggers, as independents, the last of the independents, to tell the truth about this country.
I think they've even gone into indie media. Yeah, I think that there's even smaller publications or smaller outlets that, or even individuals who say, "Oh yeah, I'm fully independent," and then but really they're mouthpieces for the CIA. Some people have pointed at Bellingcat, accusing them of being part of the CIA apparatus. I think there's also probably independent people that they're putting in positions to look like they're independently run and running off of donors, all in an effort to just control the narrative. And that is what's, what you're pointing out here is that you've got the CIA that really should be just an intelligence collection apparatus. And instead, they're not only operating very dangerous and sinister operations that include murder and toppling of governments, but also propaganda. They're acting as propagandizers, trying to get us to just go along with all of their sinister plans. And they have been sinister plans because what good have they done for the country? I mean, really, when we look back at all of the years of the CIA in operation, and I can't think of anything that they've done for the country that's been any good. I mean, since World War II, we've had failure after failure after failure when it comes to foreign policy. It's just been an operation for certain groups of people to make a lot of money and to continue to funnel power into certain groups in the hands of a very few people. I mean, I don't even know why we need them. I don't know what good they've done. I don't know what good any of the military industrial complex has done for this country since World War II. I mean, maybe some minor wins, but we're talking minor.